Spotlight on metabolism and energy balance.
Breakdown and release of energy. Anaerobic reactions are reactions that do not require oxygen. Aerobic reactions are reactions that require oxygen. The complete breakdown of glucose uses four major metabolic pathways: glycolysis, pyruvate to acetyl, the citric acid cycle, and the electron transport chain. Glycolysis takes place in the cytosol of the cell. The remaining reactions take place in the mitochondria. Extracting energy from glucose requires several steps. Glycolysis breaks the 6-carbon glucose molecule into two pyruvate molecules. After glycolysis, the remaining breakdown pathways are used twice, once for each pyruvate molecule. When completely oxidized, each glucose molecule yields carbon dioxide, water, and ATP.
Extracting energy from protein. To extract energy from amino acids, cells strip them down to carbon skeletons. The remaining nitrogen becomes urea, which is removed by the kidneys. The carbon skeleton structure determines where it enters the catabolic pathways. Some carbon skeletons become pyruvate, others become acetyl CoA, and still others become intermediate compounds of the citric acid cycle. Complete breakdown of amino acid yields water, carbon dioxide, urea, and ATP. Alcohol metabolism. The liver is the alcohol's processing center. The primary metabolic enzymes are alcohol dehydrogenase and aldehyde dehydrogenase. When large amounts of alcohol are consumed, some alcohol is metabolized by the NEOS pathway.
Making carbohydrates, also known as glucose. Your body sets a high priority on maintaining an adequate amount of glucose circulating in the bloodstream. Blood glucose is the primary source of energy for your brain, central nervous system, and red blood cells. In fact, while you're at rest, your brain consumes about 60% of the energy consumed by your entire body. Glycogen stores are limited. Fasting or strenuous exercise can deplete them rapidly. Making fatty acids. Your body can make glucose from pyruvate, lactate, glyconic amino acids, and glycerol, but not from fatty acids. The main storage of glucose is glycogen. When your diet supplies an excess of energy, your body makes fatty acids and triglycerides. Excess dietary carbohydrate is not readily converted to fat, but instead shifts the body's selection of fuel and encourages the accumulation of dietary fat in body fat stores. Making ketone bodies. There are three types of ketone bodies: acetoacetate, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and acetone. They can be made from the precursor acetyl CoA. Ketone bodies are an important fuel source during starvation because they are able to be used in place of glucose by the brain. In uncontrolled type 1 diabetes, an accumulation of ketone bodies can acidify the blood, resulting in ketoacidosis. Making protein, also known as amino acids. Proteins are made from the combination of indispensable and dispensable amino acids. The body synthesizes dispensable amino acids from purate, other compounds involved in glycolysis, and compounds from the citric acid cycle. Special states. There are two types: fasting and feasting. Feasting, or taking in too many calories, stimulates anabolic processes such as glycogen and fat synthesis. After a meal that contains dietary fat, carbohydrate, and protein, dietary fat will be deposited as fatty acids in tissue. Dietary amino acids in excess of what is needed for protein synthesis and carbohydrate in excess of what is needed for glycogen synthesis and energy will be converted to fatty acids and deposited in tissue, leading to the accumulation of fat stores. In fasting, or underconsumption of energy, or calories, favors catabolic pathways. The body first obtains fuel from stored glycogen, then from stored fat and body proteins, such as muscle. Over time, the body adapts to using more and more ketone bodies as fuel because limited carbohydrate is available. Larger stores of fat in tissue extend survival time during starvation. In prolonged starvation, the body catabolizes muscle tissue to continue minimal production of glucose from amino acids.
Your body is in the energy exchange business. You balance the energy you expend with energy you take in from the food you eat. Energy intake is the amount of fuel you consume through the food you eat. Energy output is the amount you expend. Now, if you do a fairly good job of equalizing the intake and expenditure, your body does the rest, which is basically maintaining energy equilibrium or basically keeping your weight stable. People who maintain a relatively constant weight are in energy equilibrium, meaning the calories that they consume are pretty much equal to the calories they expend. Your body can be in energy equilibrium even if the energy intake is high, as long as the expenditure is the same. The same goes if the energy intake is low, as long as the expenditure is low. However, there are situations where the energy intake doesn't equal to the energy expenditure. Positive energy balance is when you consume more energy than you expend. The surplus in calories will be stored as fat. Now, positive energy balance is not always bad. Pregnant women and growing children need positive energy balance. However, it can be bad because positive energy balance results from overeating and inactivity that leads to unneeded weight gain. Negative energy balance is when you consume fewer calories than you expend. When obtaining the fuel you need, your body uses it to store glycogen and fat, and body weight goes down. A complex interaction between internal and external cues is believed to help the body regulate food intake and thus maintain energy equilibrium. Internal cues involve interactions and feedback mechanisms among neuropeptides, hormones, and other hormone-like compounds. External cues involve stimuli in the eating environment and include the sight, smell, and taste of food. They ultimately work together to ensure that we eat enough to survive. Hunger, satiation, and satiety are three distinct sensations. Hunger prompts eating. It's basically the signal in our brain that tells us we need food. Satiation is the second internal cue that tells us we had enough to eat. Satiety is the third internal cue, which represents the length of time the satiation lasts and generally lets us know when to eat. Now, there are external cues that can stimulate appetite, which complicates the works of the three distinct internal cue sensations. Sites throughout the body monitor energy status and sends reports to the brain, which can stimulate feelings of hunger, satiation, and satiety. Gastrointestinal sensations are basically when food fills your stomach and small intestine. They stretch and trigger signals to the brain. Your sense of fullness suppresses your urge to eat. Neurological and hormonal factors, hormones, hormone-like factors, and some drugs influence eating behavior through their direct or indirect effects of the brain. NPY, known as neuropeptide Y, is a hormone-like factor in the brain that's a powerful appetite stimulator. Diet composition is basically the energy density balance of energy sources such as carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins of your foods that affect your energy intake. Sensory properties such like flavor, texture, color, temperature, and presentation influence its appeal, and such external cues affect food intake. Taste is often the reason why we are more likely to overconsume food that tastes good. Portion size. Portion size plays a role in how much we eat, with larger portions generally leading to an increase in energy intake. Environmental and social factors. We tend to eat more in cold weather and less in hot weather. And lastly, emotional factors.
Eating can provide a way to cope with stress and negative emotions. When we use food during these situations, binge eating or other disturbed eating patterns can develop.
We use energy to fuel basic body functions, process the food we eat, and support physical activity. The energy used in these basic functions is called resting energy expenditure, or REE. Factors that affect resting energy expenditure include body composition, age, and gender. An individual's fitness level and weight and the type of duration and intensity of activity affect the amount of energy expended in physical activity. The thermic effect of food is the energy needed to process the food we eat and is influenced by the amount and mix of nutrients in the diet. TEF is the energy used to digest, absorb, and metabolize energy yielding foodstuffs. It constitutes about 10% of total energy expenditure, but is influenced by various factors.
Body composition is the relative amount of fat and lean body mass. It is also the chemical or anatomical composition of the body, commonly defined as the proportions of fat, muscle, bone, and other tissues in the body. Body mass index is body weight divided by the square of height, expressed in units of kilograms over meters squared. This has become the accepted method of assessing body weight for height. Underwater weighing is a technique for measuring the mass per unit of volume of a living person's body. BOD-POD is a highly accurate assessment system based on ADP technology. Skinfold testing is a method that determines a client's body fat percentage. Android type of obesity is when the person stores fat around his or her abdominal region. These individuals appear to have an apple-like body shape. Gynoid type of obesity is when the excess fat are being deposited somewhere at the hip or thigh areas. This can give their body to appear very pear-shaped. Many factors contribute to the complex disorder of obesity. Currently, experts suggest that the best way to manage weight is to improve health by establishing healthful eating and exercise patterns and accepting the limitations of hereditary.